Please pull the mic closer to you.
Yeah. Closer.
Yes.
Is it better?
Yes, better. Better.
I should use this.
No. It's cool.
Okay, I can hear my echoes.
Yeah. I hope you're well.
I'm well. Good morning to you, and good morning to our listeners.
We're getting closer to the elections. December is the time.
Early December.
Yeah, of course, 7th December.
Yeah, so December is...
Yes. You're of the National Democratic Congress. And I'm sure you're doing some work yourself in terms of campaigning for the party on the grounds. Do you think this is a good election for you?
Yeah, I think it's a good election. And what I also like is, part of the concern, of voters is our ability, to monitor our own performance during elections.
Okay.
Which I think is something which we have taken, to heart. And so when I see the occurrences which are coming out of the display of the register, I think we should not forget that it's our vigilance, that with respect to both, transfers and people who are sent, outside their polling areas. And I was in Yelo where I vote, where I've always, voted, the Yelo constituency. And some of these were notified. In fact, our team collated constituency-wide, and we had over 800 infractions.
800?
Yes, because it was itemized, including, of course, the issue of people who are in their, who were moved without their consent to other areas, yes. So I think it's real. And but the point I was making is that it should tell the public that the NDC, is vigilant. And so when the flag bearer says that on election day, make sure that you are there, if it means a vigil, until the voting, the votes are, or the ballots are counted and recorded, and we are convinced, and even taking, keeping an open eye on the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 doesn't jump to 15, something like that. Yeah. So I think it's something which is good in terms of the monitoring. I always talk about performance. As performance speaks for itself.
Okay.
Whether you talk in infrastructure, some of which are left in bushes. I was in Anyaso recently. They had done a booklet, of development projects which were initiated from Mers Mahama, completed, even into the current administration. But those that are left
are not being used.
Uncompleted, so there's no question of use. It's like the free SHS schools that are left in the bush. There's one in my constituency, which I think after 8 years I was passing there to Upper Manya, constituency, doing their lunch, and I saw that it had been painted, and but I couldn't get confirmation that it's being used rather late in the day. But the point I'm making about that booklet is, I had the privilege of launching it, and I mentioned that this is evidence that, the Green Book wasn't photoshopped. So on the door-to-door, which they intended to use, show the community, what we were capable of. And I think we should, from the fiscal infrastructure that we did, into the fiscal performance, monetary performance. I think these are things which, voters want to hear. Because there is a tendency to say, the two parties,
are the same.
The same.
You do virtually the same things.
Yeah, exactly. But we have a record to show that we did not do what they had done. We did not send the country into default, which is severe. We did not, virtually let it first not make two, sorry, apologies, 2+1 oil fields right from day one of 2017, not making a significant impact, on the economy. We did not benefit under the ECF to 6 billion. So despite severity of about 6 billion, plus or minus, we did not benefit under the ECF 2015, from this significant injection. In fact, we barely got, the total was 915. Remember, we left office after that. And it was the MPP that benefited. So you can even add that to the oil revenue, COVID revenues, and other things that were. So I think there's a contrast. And this is what we should challenge where necessary, and we should inform, that we have a record, which. And despite all this infrastructure, as I said, we did not default. We left a decent deficit of 6.1%, of GDP. And you want a debt of approximately 57%. So you compare the numbers, and the two in management of the economy, we are not the same. Because you compare a deficit of 6.1 to go to a point about between 12 to 15%, and debt from 57 crossing, slightly below, around 90. And if you add contingency, it's over 100, doubled. Right, and so I can say confidently that in terms of economic management, the two parties are not the same. Or we're not the same, now that we have 8 years to come.
And I'll come to that point of the economic management thing. We're still on the issues in the lead up to the elections. One of them is this request from the National Democratic Congress that you want a forensic audit of the register. Now, for a lot of people, when they hear forensic audit, it seems quite a big word. Break it down for us. What does a forensic audit involve?
Audit means examination. You have to, to examine something. Okay. If I just want to simplify it as much as possible. When we accountants, do it, those who practice, accountancy, once you qualify, you can decide to do audits, you can decide to do financial accounting, you can decide to, there's a spectrum. Okay. Which you can decide to do. But the accounting firms have the capacity to do
auditing.
Everything.
Okay.
Because they are big. And so they have departments that do many of these things. So the way I can describe it for a layman without oversimplify it, at the risk of oversimplify it, to say it's an examination. And so you can say a simple, ordinary examination. Versus a more intense look into the record books. Okay. So, for example, let me take Radio Gold. You have external auditors. When they come, your accountant gives them, financial, statements. So they look at it. Because they may have been auditing you, they ask for, the underlying records, your bank statements, and your investments, which you are reflecting, adding to your assets, for example, after your refurbishment, which so when they come, they notice that, hey, something has changed. So if the records capture all this, they'll do an ordinary audit with a few here and there. On the other hand, if you suspect, for example, that, hey, it looks like this thing is, maybe later from investigation, seems to be overpriced, or, something seems to have gone wrong. They look at the records and they compare, the bank statements with what is recorded internally and that kind of thing. Then the audit examination begins to intensify in terms of, because they are now confronting complex issues. Right? They may bring in, say, their, senior partners and others to supervise the audit, to make sure that everything is right in the interest of the shareholder, your shareholders. Because they are going to present them when they go there, they present it. So I think when we hear about forensic special audits, in fact, an audit can become an investigation.
Okay.
At which case, once investigation, then it's bordering on maybe crime or malfeasance or something. And in the public sector, where I work for a long time, at that point you maybe be bringing the police.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think if we again to the elections, even the register and people to go and verify that their names are on it. In principle, it's you are auditing the register. You are looking to make sure your name is there.
Okay.
To validate something.
Okay.
So if, as has happened, that development has come out with significant anomalies across the country, and it's not disputed. Initially, there was some attempt to dispute, later concession, and now correction. So what did you correct? So you see that the request for forensic audit, which could be done. I told you about the specialization of, say, accounting firms and the rest. So it stretches from that spectrum mainly to investigations of things. I think I heard the EC itself saying that, they traced through the handwriting the individual involved and it's on suspension.
Okay.
Right. It means that now the claim is validated to some extent. Okay. So it's not enough for the one who compiled the register to tell me, I've sorted everything out when it wasn't done before. So then you're asking for an external party to come in, not your internal auditors, because the EC is a commission. So they have their accountants, they have their auditors, they have their investigators and the rest. So I think it's just a difference in intensity.
Okay. Bringing somebody in who is independent to look into the records.
Yes, usually an independent, just like you would bring in your external auditor. Okay. It's not that you don't trust your internal auditor, you don't trust your accountant and whatever, but you are working for shareholders and you are managing on a daily basis. Some may never step here, your shareholders. The only time they come is when they are board meetings. And even that some shareholders may not come. But if they come, it's the directors who are appointed by them, who they believe in, who would come in. Okay. You have executive directors. But you are doing the work, but when it comes to preparation of financial statements, then some of them will be maybe on the board, they vote and the rest. So in an ordinary sense, these things happen.
Okay.
Our former, auditor, for the states, Seth Terkper, I use the accounting firms to look at certain things in more detail, and the impact that made. He did not necessarily do all of those using his staff, because the staff are overstretched. Not that they are not competent, but they are overstretched. They are doing so many audits. So the audit service normally brings in
external
auditors to help the accounting firms. When it's external auditors, the nation's external auditor is the audit service.
Okay.
The internal one is the internal audit agency.
Okay.
And that's why we say that the audit service and the audit board, and they must be given a measure of independence, because the thing that marks audit is independence. That there was no pressure on them. There was nobody tried to influence them and that kind of thing. So independence is very important. And that's why they have constitutional independence.
So you are convinced that from listening to even the Electoral Commission, they have made a case. They have solidified the case of the NDC, that somebody who is independent needs to walk in and look at things.
Yeah, because we've moved from, hesitance to a point where it's been considered. Unless I'm mistaken, I think I heard it on the news. From the EC officials themselves that, yes, something went wrong. We've even tracked the person, based on biometric and other things that they use, and he's been suspended. I don't think I'm wrong on that. So it means at this point there's some validation in what has been said. And so beyond IPAC and the rest, most of who are also back in the core and outsiders. After it's a public institution.
Okay.
Yes, so they should listen.
Well, Honorable Seth Terkper is in studio with me today, and we'll move on to issues of the finance, because there's everybody looking at these elections, looking at it from the perspective of, am I better off now than I was when this government walked into power. And there are many things to account for that. But first, I want us to just take a step back as a country, because yesterday was a holiday that essentially acknowledged Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. They are far and in between nowadays.
Our inspiration for infrastructure development.
Oh, he was your inspiration for infrastructure development?
Of course, self-financing. I mean, the Kosovo Dam paid for itself.
Okay.
That's how it was structured. That's why what,
Okay.
you know, I think I cited as a deputy some movements, you know, which were coming, you know, from VRA for repayment of the facility. I may be mistaken, but I'm sure I'm not. But we know it's a self-financing project from the Kaiser revenues, you know, which backs up the dam itself. Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody would doubt that, you know, the Tema and other harbors, some of which existed in maybe during colonial times, but were significantly enhanced by the Osagifo, did not contribute positively to the economy and therefore did not pay for themselves. Yes.
So there was a lot you learned from him in going by the things you do whilst in power.
Oh, he left a legacy. The 7-year development plan is available, you know, and even if you don't read a 7-year development plan, listening to my senior, because apart from student days and everything, will give you an insight into you know what it contains. So today we got a facility to do the Tema to Akosombo railway line.
Okay.
It's a 7-year development plan because it was to link the Tema Harbour, you know, to Akosombo,
Okay.
and then do the badging.
Okay.
So if you go back a little back, you remember to make the water lake transportable.
Okay.
There were divers who cut the trees to allow during the PNDC era.
Okay.
You know, these are not accidents. You know, even our boats used to go sometimes in wild weather, I recall, and heavy ones used to hit, you know, stumps and things and, you know, capsizing. So that dam created, you know, the waterway, which, you know, was to be for badging, of course. So, and then fast forward, you remember Professor Mills and Mills Mahama and the CDB project, which was the multimodal element that was to do landing sites.
Okay.
Yeah, for marketing, for schooling, for everything, safer transportation. Yeah, they were also all part of that model. Because you don't have if you create a huge lake, you must utilize all this potential. The water basin as breadbasket, you know, for the economy. And then, so if goods are going up north, we often talk about transportation, but if you go to even US and the rest for centuries, Mississippi River, you know, they are used for effective, of course, you know, transportation. So the cargo that's going up north can just be put on barges and they are taking, you recall, Wipe. Yeah, the big dock inside there. And then, so it cuts the transportation, the damage of our roads.
Okay.
You know, yeah. And then it can be taken up. So if we're thinking about railway, it could be shortened with a good barging. You know, up north, you don't have to come on the way to Kumasi to take it up.
So the idea of building, what do you call it, a railway line from Tema to Akosombo Dam is you move the goods from the port to the railway.
In fact, the landing will actually be Bupe.
Okay.
The goods are not landed in Tema. They are transited in Tema, and so there will be whole customs clearance and things, sort of the shipping companies having, if that terminal is completed. Yeah.
So that's the idea.
It's always been there.
Okay.
It's always been the idea.
So in order to make it effective, it means you have to also improve the transportation on the Volta.
That's the idea. Whole there behind on the Volta. You know, the removal of the stamps was not just for ordinary, because you're going to move heavy goods on the river, on barges, you know, which are powered and they take it. And of course, to them also be suitable. We could have catamarans and things, you know, transportation quite easily. River transport is in the Caribbean and other places. As I said, in the U.S., river transport. People who live outside Washington, they use the Potomac. Many of them just use docking sites.
Okay.
And so in the morning, they park their cars, there's parking, and they use the the Potomac River to get to Washington, D.C., Alexandria, and others too. So these are some of the concepts that went into.
And you were thinking about all this. You were thinking about executing all this whilst in power.
There are people, yes, but that's the essence of the infrastructure that we're doing. That's the essence of expanding the port. That's the essence of the railway line. It's not just, of course, it will help, passengers, because all you have to do is to get parking, around Michelle Camp and the dense, areas, and people just come and park. They take the train, they get to Tema. If you are going to Accra, you connect. That's what happens. When I was in the US, I took train. Of course, I have my love for trains started from taking trains to my grandfather's farm, back those days. I never drove to work.
Okay.
Of course, in inclement weather, sometimes you may want to ask yourself why you didn't. Inclement means maybe snow with blocks and other things. Then you have big lines. But on average, so we could have apart from the cargo, and I recall those days in the early days, there were trains that were called a goods train.
Okay.
And we were told they stop at every station. But because it's for market women and the rest.
Okay.
But we normally took the blue train, which was the passenger, train. And there's a stop in every place. And this was what was happening. Post-Nkrumah eras, I even experienced it. So when you study all this, then it's there. I mean, the plan the vision does not diminish with time. And I recall very well. I recall when I was young, if you traveled from my area, Somaya, and you took the Tema Road, right, as you entered Accra, there were high mounds on the left.
Okay.
There were railway tracks on it. That was the Kosovo railway line.
Okay.
From the Nkrumah era, that was stopped. If you can probably look for somebody who lives in the area, especially the elderly people, and they will bet me out. But it was stopped. I think it was stopped somewhere around Shire Hills or so. Yeah.
Because and he's always, in terms of his approach to development, has always, depending on who you're speaking to, split opinion. There are those who feel some of the things were too audacious. Were audacious. Like they feel that
as audacious as 50 years time, we are still using them. As audacious at the time, that's what vision is all about. So take them Harbour. Yes, it was thought to be audacious. And we couldn't expand it. And we are still using the basic infrastructure. Now we've done some expansion. Or the airport, which for a long time were, until Terminal 2 was, expanded, and then Terminal 3 came along. And now we are going back to use, I had it on air. We are going back. Airport company has decided that, some of the flights, because of Accra becoming like a hub, should be moved back to Terminal 2, the international flights, to ease the congestion in Terminal 2. And Terminal 2 is self-financing. Again, on the same model. It's the airport tax that is paying for Terminal 2, unless something has gone wrong. That's how it was designed. And in fact, the concourse was to be moved, to, Airport City 2, where now it's for private. So, yeah, there's a parliamentary resolution to that effect. But we just defy it. And when you move the concourse to that area, because you cannot do the international airport, the big one, immediately, it was also have a twin hotel.
Okay.
For transit, those who are transiting, they don't have to get out and be looking, because they can't go out,
and those hotels are supposed to be owned by the airport company limited.
Airport company and the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund. In fact, the land was under the resolution was vested in the Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund.
Okay.
Yes, because it's for commercial infrastructure.
Is that still being developed?
Well, it's been developed. I'm told it's private development. I don't know if it is, as usual.
But you didn't intend it to be a private development?
No. It's, as I said, the land was owned. It was to be build, operated, transfer. So I think it was for 15 years. It would have gone, to Ghana Infrastructure Investment Fund, which, if the scheme works together with all that, it means that we can then prove to the markets, or Infrastructure Investment Fund, not the government, can prove to the markets that we are capable of raising money and paying for it through, because this will be the city airport. That one will be, the Pram one, that has been there for very long. Yeah. And then the railway network we were talking about will connect it to Tema. That's all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, so, and it's interesting to hear you say this.
Yeah, that's we all know Nkrumah did infrastructure, and we know he envisaged infrastructure, but he's also a Pan-Africanist.
Yeah.
So as a Pan-Africanist, and as a man who led us to independence, revered for those things, the political side, is known
more pronounced.
Exactly. But there's a political economy element, or there's an economic element. Yeah, to it.
Well, what do you make of his whole idea of the fact that Africa needs to work together as an economic bloc?
Is that not the dream of the EU today? Agenda 2063, that's what it's all about. And that's when you go to Ethiopia, his statue is there. On the compound of the EU. Is that not what the EU is talking today? Is that not what Agenda 2063, which I happen to have the privilege of, working on, has social, economic, political, and all the elements, and it is seeking to link. Is that what ECOWAS is about, from a West African perspective? Our sale of power first from the dam, and now from thermal plant, and all that. Is that interregional? That's a regional coordination. The power from Ghana, Nigeria. Now Senegal has discovered, I understand they are going to do commercial quantity. So our landlocked neighbors and the rest, we supply power to them. So that is the integration. And then under Obama's Power Africa program, which was actually part of the MCC, later became part of the MCC program, which we saw. That the US was looking to support the total lighting of Africa, through grids. Whether by dam, by thermal, by whatever, yes. So that's a man's dream. So we are living it.
But we're still not there yet. As an economic bloc, as the way the EU operates.
But still a solid vision, which we can pursue. And as I said, the inspiration for some of the things that we were doing in infrastructure, his passion for schools, right? So, and he needed to modernize, which was probably what was in vogue at the time. If you go to Europe, America, and the rest, they don't have boarding schools for public. There are buses that take the kids to school. Yeah, the US famous, yellow buses. And so the e-schools is to take education, to continue with his passion for education all across the country, particularly, in the north. And so remember, I took another Nkrumah, to do the school under trees, and another less of central government to do the e-schools, which will be more accessible and cheaper, than boarding schools. Boarding schools is very expensive. So even if you don't phase it out, because of course you can't phase them out immediately. When I make this point, people say, but how about those who don't live in it? You make it merit-based. Yeah, you make it merit-based. And so if it's merit-based, anybody from anywhere, I came from sports somewhere through Kokobo scholarship is a good example to get to where I am today. Yeah, so you make it merit-based because you can't face it out immediately, but over time, let history determine whether the e-schools or they remain merit-based.
Okay. Having said that, now I'll move to Nkrumah because you raised this issue of you're not coming to the issue of the free senior high school. Now, you're one of those who, from the very beginning, thought the approach was going to be problematic. You were clear from the very beginning.
Unfettered free SHS,
yes,
and I've never backed down from it. Unfettered free SHS. And I wasn't saying because of you. Doing a manifesto.
What was the problem for you? Because
it's fiscal. It's as simple as that. It's fiscal. There's no way we can finance it.
money?
No, yeah, absolutely.
There's no way that this can be financed?
No.
Not even.
If unfettered free SHS is possible, the US would have been doing it. Europe would have been doing it. And they had boarding. They have boarding schools. Don't get me wrong. When you go there, they have boarding schools. But the majority are private. You hardly see in the US, because it's a federal state, the basic responsibility is, at the local level. Yes. And the rules are there. And I experienced it because, of course, I lived after my job, VAT, I got an appointment, went to the US. The rules are there. Because we lived within less than 2 kilometers of my son's school. He back to school, or he walked to school. The school bus passes by. He picks other seats, but it doesn't stop for them. If we were maybe 2 kilometers away or something beyond 1 kilometer, then you join the bus.
Okay.
So, yeah, and we could have adaptations of it. For example, the bus, maybe the schools are buses, maybe they may not be adequate. All the schools are buses. The yellow buses that were supplied, that's one of their purposes. It's not just for sports or for games. In the morning, they go around. And so if it's a district, for example, within a certain, area, yeah, they go and picnics. But in the US, in many places, they are pooled, for a couple of schools, So its administration is.
So the workable approach for you is the community-day schooling?
It's inevitable.
It's inevitable?
It's inevitable. If we want to expand access to secondary education, it's inevitable.
Work on community-day schooling?
Yes. Because boarding is expensive. Payment of every fee is expensive. And that's why we started the progressively fee-free education, which is based on, you saw the speed with which those 200 schools were going to be built. Yeah. We ended up scaling down to about 100 and completing some and not, because crude oil prices had fallen in 2015, 2016. But we would have accelerated it that we won in 2017 because, I would have respected the PRMA, the provisions, what went into. I would have built more funds for COVID, definitely. Yeah, because if they took 250, as I often say, I've said it here, so pro rata, 250 minimum times 3, or if 750, then you go to the fund and you borrow 250. You don't go for 1 billion because you have your own 750. Yeah.
So if
crises are inevitable, they always come.
So from what you saw from 2017 when they took over till now, in that position, you would have easily done the 200.
I have the conviction, and I don't think I can back down. So you can see immediately after, you can let your producer check. Immediately after the budget was read, I said that unfettered free SHS is not possible. 2017.
Based on the numbers.
It's not. Well, we have to progressively offer opportunity to those who qualify, those who, yes, but I'm saying there's a feasible way of doing it. And so you see that our manifesto is very guided, including a transition period, right? When, you can put timelines on some of these things because you need to build a bridge between the unfettered and where you want to go. And so, as the flag bearer was explaining, what do you do with, students first year, predominantly boarding, what do you do with them? You see, it's a compromise because you give them the opportunity to go in, and hopefully going forward, they can take student loans and the rest. And student loan is another feature. Because it's unsustainable, that's why they have student loans in advanced countries everywhere, because these things are not sustainable. You're talking about a large number. Remember, you are basic before secondary, and tuition is free up to, So we have a reasoned approach. What we have been doing is that you need a bridge, right? Yes. So the manifesto committee is building a bridge so that you don't disrupt at the expense of, the very, kids and parents you want to help, right? But you have a long-term vision of e-schools, and I don't think that has changed. Yeah.
But those in power suggest that what you are proposing is amounts to a cancellation of free SHS.
No, I'm explaining it. Anybody listening to me, have I said we should cancel it? I'm saying that we need to build a bridge because a certain dispensation has been built. It has cost us so much. In fact, the very first time I had confirmation that this thing is not feasible in numbers, right, was when I believe the 2018 bonds, when I saw the working paper in Parliament, and 2.2 billion was being devoted to free SHS, borrowed money. 2.2 billion Ghana cedis of that bond was being devoted to free SHS. I mean, some of us have the opportunity to read the technical details. The fund is in town again, yeah, and it is there. So, yeah, so you see there are reports and whatever. Maybe we can have some time to discuss it.
And I'll go to what the fund has done.
Sorry, so my simple point is that, so if it will take 2.2 billion Ghana cedis to sustain free SHS, you need that money every year. And if you cannot finance it and you went to borrow, then it means that you continue borrowing. Is there any doubt that we've defaulted?
Let me come to one interesting feature of this election. Now, in 2016, when we were finance minister, in the lead up to the election, the whole discussion was about the economy we're building. But the vice president mounted lectures where they condemned everything you were doing from head to toe. Called you, the president then, former President John Dramani Mahama, incompetent. Every one of you within the economic management team, you as the finance minister, the vice president, and then also went on to even ridicule the economic management team after they left power. Interestingly, he is on the face of the ballot paper. Do you hear a lot about the economy as much as you
I hear
thought
more
you'd have heard?
promises. I hear more promises. He doesn't talk about the performance of the economy because we all know it's dismal. So all we hear is more promises. It's accountability. As I sit here, as being the key person, and for finance, under President Mahama, I'm confident to talk about record. So let's talk records.
So
I just gave you some numbers. Yes.
You're not hearing that discussion on their records?
No, there's no discussion on the record. You hear big ones, like in my region, I was in my constituency, and I saw a tall list of, projects that had been done. I'm not disputing them, right? But every government develops infrastructure, right? But how do you develop it such that you don't collapse the economy? So you did that. Okay. So how did you do it? Is it budget resources? Is it borrowing? And is it sustainable? What we tried to do after HIPIC, when we declared the end of HIPIC 2013, because the HIPIC flows were no longer, coming in. So we decided to have, schemes. Many of them were being used by the middle income countries. You see, when we sit down and we talk on ending about how Malaysia learned from Ghana, how Korea was like Ghana and the rest. For me, the question is, how did they get there? Right? China, now about 40 years ago, was a virtually developing country in many parts of outside the capitals. So how did they get there? I think that's the more relevant question. And when we were doing the CDB program and we went to China, and I was talking to, one of, their, young people with, expertise and whatever, you could see he was Western trained. He told me he went to Yale or something. And then he was talking about the fantastic ratings for CDB and EXIM. So I took those. I thought, oh, really? Are they on the markets? Is Shanghai Stock Exchange? No. They're on the New York Stock Exchange. They're on the London Stock Exchange. And that's where they get their cheap money for development. Right? And so that is why we set up the sinking funds so that we could also get a repayment mechanism. You can let somebody Google. You Google during the break. Ratings. China is in ratings. China CDB. During the break over there, you can read it out to you. Yeah. Those are the models. No country develops on its own budget. Didn't Trump, one of the issues Biden, one of the issues now is the US overborrowing, right? Yeah. But you can see visibly what Biden is doing. President Biden is doing. He's fixing old infrastructure, old bridges, old roads in the rural areas, telephoning, means of, or how we can say mobile and others, data, to remote. There are places in the US which are remote. They don't have reliable, data. So they are building the infrastructure, and then they subsidize, to them. So I mean, those are models. I happen to have done some work on accession countries. That's countries that from former Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, which became independent after the Soviet Union. Today we get loans from some of them, right? But this way they have to learn and they have to meet conditions before they can join the EU. Why can't we learn from those conditions? You remember during the global financial crisis, Greece, Ireland, Portugal, as I was saying, they went to the fund. COVID, did they go to the fund? They learned their lesson. It was also shameful for them as advanced countries to go to the IMF. In fact, Ireland paid about 1.5 years in advance. So we're talking about, practical steps. So we can talk unendingly about what this country did or what that country did. Let's adopt them. Or as I'm typically saying, let's take the ideas.
So at this point, what you were expecting was a conversation on the record.
On the record.
But you're not hearing that. What you're hearing are promises.
Have you heard that? All I hear is promises. Have you heard the performance on debt? We all know we've defaulted. Even as we speak, and IMF meeting is down. We are still in London negotiating. I heard 2 days or so ago that we are about to. And I'm sure that, and it's a conditionality. That's why. Because when we got approval, we went to the board on account of, to get approval for the IMF program. France and China, you remember? They had to grant waiver. First review, which was also the Article 4. No, second review was Article 4, which was also Article 4. We got another waiver to go. In November, we have to go to the board. And that's why they are here. If we don't finish it, we will have to get waiver from the same creditors again before we go to the board.
Then how do you feel when the same people or their communicators still refer to your boss as incompetent?
We should challenge it. We've been challenging it. Twitter everywhere. We should challenge it. And do things like what Honorable Jinapor did ahead of, the presentation on energy. Yeah. Because he's solid in the sector. So, so yes. So we should challenge those notions. And people are listening. Otherwise, it will seem like the two parties are the same. No, we did more. I'm not saying that we did what? Excellent, for people who are very high standards. But I'm saying that we had a program, we had a vision. All I'm talking about is in a homegrown policy, which we used to negotiate the 2015 IMF program. So IMF was aware of it, sinking fund and all this. If you borrow, you have to learn to repay. It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter if it's an individual, a household, or a government.
Well, I still have a studio with Honorable Seth Terkper, but I need to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about the IMF being in town, among other issues that could influence these elections.
Hey, nowadays, germs are in the air. Aren't you concerned?